Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really undertaking quite an intense exploration. We're looking at two subjects that, well, usually live in completely separate academic boxes.
Yeah, neuropsychiatric disorder on one side and religious commitment on the other. Quite the combination you presented us with.
It really forced us to dig into, the very architecture of human experience itself.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to conduct a pretty profound analysis using this framework called Phenomenology. It's basically the study of experience, of consciousness.
And the core idea, the really surprising thesis connecting these two seemingly disparate areas, is this concept of altered existential feelings.
Altered existential feelings. Okay, let's unpack this a bit because it sounds fundamental. We're talking about something often invisible, right?
Yeah.
A kind of foundational layer of experience.
Exactly. It's the layer that dictates our entire sense of reality, even before we form a specific thought or put a label on an emotion. It's the very framework that makes the world intelligible to us in the first place.
Okay, the framework. And that feels like a good moment for a really important clarification you mentioned from the source material.
Yes, absolutely crucial. We have to stress this right at the start. This is a phenomenological analysis. We're looking at the structure of experience during these states, illness and faith.
So the claim isn't that they're the same thing.
No, definitely not. It's not saying neuropsychiatric illness and religious commitment are identical, and it's certainly not saying religiosity is somehow pathological. That's not the point at all.
Okay.
The connection is structural. It's about a shared root, potentially, in how these fundamental background feelings can change, how they get altered.
So we're looking at a shared mechanism of experience, not saying the states are equivalent.
Precisely. It's about the how of the experience,
Yes.
not just the what.
Understood. Structural analysis, not a medical diagnosis or anything like that. So, okay, let's start right at the beginning. The foundation. We need to get a really solid grip on this concept. Existential feeling, or EF. You mentioned the philosopher Matthew Radcliffe.
Yes, Radcliffe introduced the term because he saw this whole set of affective experiences that were kind of neglected. They often get wrongly lumped in with, everyday moods or emotions.
Right. So how do we tease them apart? What makes an emotion like anger or fear different from this EF?
The key distinction Radcliffe makes is intentionality. Standard emotions are typically understood as being intentional.
Meaning they're directed at something.
Exactly. They have an object, you're afraid of the dog barking, you're happy about the good news, you're angry at the driver who cut you off.
Okay, there's a specific target.
Right. And these emotions often come with distinct bodily feelings, too, shaking with anger, heart pounding with fear. They're reactions within a situation.
So specific feelings tied to specific things happening in the world. Where do existential feelings fit then, if they're not at something specific?
They are, as Radcliffe puts it, pre-intentional. They don't have that specific object in the same way. Their role is much more fundamental. They provide the essential background structure.
The background.
Yeah, the background that allows those specific things, the dog, the news, the driver, to even show up as meaningful objects for you to react to in the first place.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
That's quite abstract. So I'm not feeling something about the background. I'm feeling the background itself.
In a way, yes, you're feeling the way the world is structured for you, how it hangs together moment to moment. Think of it like this. To feel angry or happy, you first have to be operating within a world that feels, coherent. A world with possibilities, projects, relationships.
A world where things matter.
Precisely.
Sure.
EF captures that usually taken for granted sense of being in the world, of belonging to the world, of the world being a place where you can act and feel.
It's like the stage lighting. You don't usually notice the lights themselves, just the actors and the scene they illuminate.
Yeah.
But if the lights go out or turn a weird color, suddenly you notice them.
That's a great analogy. Or like gravity, it makes everything possible, but you only really think about it if you suddenly start floating. EF is like that. It pre-structures all our experience, thought, activity.
So it stays hidden most of the time.
Usually, yeah. We're typically absorbed in whatever we're doing, enjoying the sunset, having a chat, working on a problem. The background conditions just hum along, stable and unnoticed. Tacit.
Like grammatical rules. We use them constantly, but we only really notice them if someone breaks them dramatically, or if we, sit down to actually analyze a sentence like a
Like
linguist.
a phenomenologist in this case. Exactly. So, if they're so hard to notice, how do people even describe them when they do change? What words do they use?
Well, that's the challenge. Because they structure our relationship with the world as a whole, people often struggle with standard emotion words. The descriptions tend to be more relational and holistic, they talk about the world itself feeling different.
Okay. So less I feel sad and more the world feels.
Exactly. You hear descriptions like feeling distant, detached, or estranged from the world. The world itself seems strange, maybe empty, or even forbidding.
Like being an alien on your own planet. Something like that. And conversely, when the EF is what you might call positive, people talk about feeling in tune with, part of, or in harmony with the world. The world feels homely, expansive, peaceful, welcoming.
It's the difference between feeling like you're at home in reality versus feeling like you're just watching it through a window.
That captures it really well, and this connects directly to what we call the sense of reality.
Right. How does EF relate to just things feeling real?
EF constitutes our implicit sense of reality. Think about anything around you right now, your phone, a cup, the task ahead. For any of these things to be available, usable, or significant to you.
They first have to feel real, right? Part of a coherent world.
Precisely. They need to be located within this holistic, meaningful structure that EF provides. When that background sense of reality shifts, when the EF changes, the world instantly feels altered or strange, even if nothing physically changed.
So the objects are the same, but their meaning, their realness, drains away.
Yes. And that collapse of the meaningful structure, that's absolutely central to understanding the experiences in severe illness.
So it's not, I'm sad about my job. It's more like the very possibility of having a meaningful job or any meaningful activity feels like it's gone.
That structural collapse is the absolute key difference. It's a change in the world's possibilities.
Okay. If that's the basic infrastructure of our existence, where do we see it breaking down most dramatically? Which brings us, I suppose, to section 2, altered existential feelings and neuropsychiatric illness.
Exactly. And here, the first-person accounts are just invaluable. We have to listen to how people describe the experience from the inside. Otherwise, we're just looking at symptoms from the outside.
And these accounts, especially from major depression or schizophrenia, they're often devastating because they describe exactly this loss of the foundational EF, right?
Absolutely. In major depression, people consistently describe the change not as, specific negative thoughts about themselves, although those might be present too. The core change is in the entire environment, the world itself.
There's that quote you flagged from the sources. It's incredibly evocative. I awoke into a different world, a nightmare. It was as though all had changed while I slept.
That phrase, a different world, really highlights the totality of the shift. It's not just a bad mood coloring things. The very structure of the experienced world is altered.
And there was another one about the loss of possibility.
Yes, incredibly powerful. You know that you have lost life itself. You've lost a habitable earth. You've lost the invitation to live that the universe extends to us at every moment.
Wow. The invitation to live. That phrase really nails it, doesn't it? It clarifies that what's lost isn't just happiness, it's agency. The possibility of engaging with the world meaningfully.
That's precisely the phenomenological interpretation. What's eroded is that taken-for-granted sense of reality, the one that normally opens up the world as a structured space of significant possibilities. When that goes,
The world stops inviting you in. It becomes alien, strange, maybe just dead.
exactly. The entire character of the world shifts. People use metaphors like falling into a deep black pit or entering a state of non-being. They talk about the ability to live just receding. These aren't just metaphors for sadness. They're descriptions of structural changes in the world of experience. The framework of practical possibilities collapses.
And that would explain things like anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure so directly. If the world isn't showing up as a space for significant possibilities.
Then how could anything register as enjoyable or desirable? There's no framework for significance, for pleasure to even attach itself to. It all connects back to that fundamental EF shift.
Okay. And to really see the power of this structural reality, you mentioned looking at the opposite moments of restoration, particularly in the accounts of schizophrenia.
Yes, the example of Renee's experience from her diaries is incredibly striking because it shows the mirror image. The restoration highlights what was lost.
Right. Before that moment of restoration, she described her world as terrifyingly disconnected, wasn't it?
Utterly. She described it as infinite space, unreal, where everything was cut off, naked, and isolated. Think about that cutoff, naked, isolated. That's the world losing its coherence.
And people.
People were perceived as automatons, phantoms, not real embodied individuals situated in a shared world, but just mechanisms, moving figures without depth or connection. That's a profound description of estrangement, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's the ultimate loss of shared reality.
Yeah.
But then There was this moment where it snapped back.
Yes, a sudden, powerful restoration. And her description is just as telling. I saw reality, marvelous reality for the first time.
Marvelous reality. What specifically changed for her in that moment? Was it just that she suddenly felt happy?
The joy seems to have been a result of the structural change, not the cause. What she describes changing is the world. People became concrete individuals again. And crucially, everyday things she mentions, cushions, cars, suddenly became,
Useful.
yes, useful things, having sense, capable of giving me pleasure. That's the key phrase. The world returned as a space of significant practical possibility. Ah, so the cushion wasn't just a shape and color anymore. It was for sitting. The car was for driving. They regained their function, their place in a meaningful world.
Exactly. The world stopped being a collection of meaningless, isolated facts or objects and became once again a deeply structured, meaningful environment that she could engage with.
And the feeling of joy came from that reconnection, that sense of belonging returning.
That seems to be the core of it. The joy is the effective recognition that the background sense of belonging, the stable EF, has returned. Without that sense of belonging, engagement just collapses, which you also see in things like derealization.
Right, derealization, depersonalization syndrome. That sounds almost like a clinical name for a direct assault on this existential feeling.
It really does. Patients describe the world feeling unreal, like a movie set, flat, lacking emotional resonance or significance. They feel detached from themselves, too. That's the depersonalization part.
Losing their own sense of distinctness, even experiencing things like autoscopy, seeing themselves from outside. Yes, watching their own body move as if it's not theirs. It's a profound loss of what phenomenologists call situatedness, that basic feeling of being grounded in your body, in the world.
And the sources mention neurological links for these states, right? Like brain injuries, migraines.
Absolutely. There are known neurological associations, brain tumors, epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, head injuries, migraines. The science is important for understanding underlying mechanisms.
So the argument here is,
The argument is that the experience itself, the profound sense of estrangement, the loss of hope, the feeling of unreality, is best understood, described, and grasped through this structural phenomenological lens. The neurological facts don't negate the experiential structure. They might underpin it, but they don't replace the need to understand the experience itself.
which leads us right into the philosophical deep end. Section 3, Phenomenology versus Neuroscience. The showdown.
The methodological showdown, yes.
Okay, so if we're saying phenomenology gives us the best description of the experience of illness, we absolutely have to tackle the counter-argument. Why shouldn't neuroscience, the science of the brain where all this experience ultimately happens, have the final word? Why isn't it the primary way to understand this?
This really gets to the heart of the phenomenological tradition's claim about its own priority. The founders, people like Husserl, argued that empirical sciences, neuroscience included, are actually a second-order kind of inquiry.
Second order, now, hang on. That sounds provocative. Why second order? Surely the physical brain activity is the fundamental reality. Isn't looking at that the most direct route?
It feels intuitive, doesn't it? But the phenomenological critique runs deeper. Empirical science, by its very nature, focuses on particular objects within the world. Neurons, chemicals, brain regions, stimuli.
Things it can measure.
Right, things within the world. But for a scientist to even begin their work, to select an object for study, to design an experiment, to trust their instruments they have, to already rely on a fundamental pre-existing sense of the world.
They have to assume the world is real, that it's coherent enough for science to work, that their measurements mean something.
Precisely. They presuppose the very background sense of reality, the stable EF, that makes scientific inquiry possible in the first place. Science studies things in the world. Phenomenology studies the structure of the world that makes science, and indeed any experience, possible.
Okay, so the critique is that science is derivative in that sense. It can't account for its own foundations. It just takes the stage of reality for granted.
Exactly. It obliviously presupposes the conditions of its own possibility. And if that's true, then the claim that neuroscience is somehow more fundamental than phenomenology, epistemically speaking, starts to look shaky. One studies the contents, the other studies the container, or rather, the very structure that allows there to be contents.
And this isn't just abstract philosophy, is it? There's a real risk here, the error of abstraction. If neuroscience proceeds without a good phenomenological map,
A huge risk, especially for understanding complex experiences like mental illness. It's the risk of carving up reality in ways that don't match the actual lived experience.
how would that play out? Let's take that patient example again.
Okay, the patient says, Nothing seems real anymore, my body feels peculiar, and the world is drained of significance. That's their reported experience.
A neuroscientist looking for brain correlates might reasonably think, okay, let's break this down. We have a cognitive component, the belief or feeling of unreality. B, a somatic component, the strange bodily feeling. And C, an affective component, the loss of significance or emotional flatness.
Right. And then the hunt begins for 3 distinct neural correlates, one for each component, maybe in different brain networks.
Makes sense from a scientific perspective, isolate the variables.
But what if phenomenology shows us that this isn't 3 separate problems? What if nothing seems real, my body feels peculiar, and the world is drained of significance, are actually just 3 inseparable facets of one single unified experiential change?
The collapse of the EF.
Yeah.
The loss of that situatedness in a world of possibilities.
Exactly. The body feels peculiar because the world feels unreal, and both contribute to the loss of significance. It's one integrated breakdown. If you go looking for 3 separate neural correlates, you might be chasing ghosts. You risk correlating brain activity with artificial categories that don't actually exist as independent parts of the experience.
So phenomenology isn't just adding flavor. It's providing the essential map of the territory that neuroscience needs to explore meaningfully. It defines what needs explaining.
That's argument number 1, essentially. Phenomenology provides the subject matter. It describes and clarifies the very experiences that empirical science investigates. Scientific concepts, methods, even the questions scientists ask, they all arise within that space of possibilities that phenomenology charts.
Okay, and argument 2, that tackles the reduction issue, right? Even if we find a perfect correlation.
Right. Let's imagine neuroscience achieves its ultimate goal. We find a perfect one-to-one correlation, a specific complex pattern of neural firing that always occurs when someone reports feeling that profound sense of world estrangement and never occurs otherwise.
The neural signature of estrangement. Why isn't that the full explanation? Why isn't that reduction?
Because correlation, however perfect, isn't reduction. Even that complete, detailed map of every single neural event associated with the experience, it still wouldn't be a description of the structure of that experience.
It tells you the how in terms of mechanism, but not the what in terms of lived meaning. It's like having the blueprint of a house versus living in it.
Exactly. The neural map shows you the physical substrate, the flickering lights on the console, but it doesn't convey the quality, the structure, the meaning of the experience itself, the feeling of the world collapsing, the loss of hope, the sense of alienation.
Knowing which neurons fire doesn't tell you what it's like for the world to feel unreal.
Precisely. So the conclusion here is that giving neuroscience ultimate priority, acting as if the brain scan tells the whole story, would actually impoverish our understanding. It would mean ignoring the rich descriptive resources of phenomenology, which are essential for grasping the complexity of these human experiences.
So phenomenology has to come first. Methodologically and interpretively, it sets the stage.
That's the core philosophical argument presented in the sources.
Okay, that's a really solid case for the priority of phenomenology in understanding these altered states. Now, we need to bridge this to the second major theme you flagged. How does this concept of existential feelings help us understand religious commitment?
Well, just like with illness, the starting point is often a critique of a dominant but perhaps limited model,
Which is,
the belief model of religion. Traditional philosophy, and sometimes even theology, tends to focus almost exclusively on religion as a set of rationally held beliefs. You know, propositions about God, the afterlife, morality that people are supposed to assent to based on evidence or argument.
like a checklist of doctrines you tick off?
Exactly. And the argument from phenomenology and from thinkers who emphasize religious experience is that this model completely misses the engine. It fails to capture what actually animates religious life for so many people.
Which is the feeling.
The feeling, the affective core. Religious life for many isn't primarily about intellectual assent. It's animated by a foundational feeling, often a sense of connection, participation, or profound belonging in the cosmos. To really understand religious commitment, we have to look at the heart, the sensibility, the affect.
And the sources mention specific thinkers who highlighted this.
Yes, people like William James talking about spiritual excitement, or John Dewey about a fundamental religious attitude that's deeper than specific beliefs. Leszek Kolakowski emphasized a feeling of participation in the ultimate reality.
There was that term, cardiotheology.
Yes, theology of the heart. It suggests that deep religious conviction often isn't built first on rational proofs, but on a felt intuition or a deep sense of need regarding the nature of reality. Commitment arises from and is sustained by an effectively charged relationship to the world.
Okay, so if feeling is central, how do existential feelings fit in? Where's the link?
This is where thinkers like Mark Wynne come in, applying phenomenological insights. The argument is that EF provides the preconditions for religious belief and practice to even make sense.
Preconditions how?
Think about basic religious practices: praying, giving thanks, feeling awe, practicing forgiveness. Wynne argues these actions are only really possible, only feel like significant practical possibilities, if your underlying existential feeling structures the world in a certain way.
Meaning, if the world feels like a place where praying could possibly make sense, or where thanksgiving is an appropriate response.
Exactly. If your background ES presents the world as utterly bleak, meaningless, and closed off, then the act of playing to a benevolent force isn't just difficult, it might feel literally incoherent, nonsensical. The possibility isn't even there in your experiential world.
So the EF acts as an experiential basis for the beliefs. It makes them feel plausible or necessary.
Yes, that's a key idea. Certain existential feelings, that generalized sense of the nature of reality and what it means for us, can powerfully predispose someone towards certain metaphysical views.
So if the world consistently feels threatening and dark,
Then doctrines that emphasize struggle, sin, or fallen world might gain a certain experiential cogency. They seem to fit the reality you're living. Conversely, if your EF is one of harmony and connection, pantheistic or immanent ideas might feel more intuitive.
it's about the fit. The religious ideas become plausible not necessarily because of logical proofs, but because they resonate with, or provide language for, the world as it's already showing up for you at that deep, pre-reflective level.
Precisely. It's a kind of pre-reflective justification. We often think our core beliefs are purely rational, but maybe they gain their initial foothold because they just feel right, given our basic sense of reality. The religious tradition then offers the concepts and narratives to articulate, stabilize, and make sense of that feeling.
Which suggests that religious conversion or deepening commitment isn't just about changing your mind. It's aiming for something deeper.
Yes, the sources talk about a deeper transformation of the person, aiming to engender a new sensibility.
A new sensibility.
It goes beyond just agreeing with doctrines or following rules. It extends to what you feel, and crucially, how the sensory world itself is presented to you, how reality appears.
Which sounds exactly like a shift in existential feeling.
It does. And this is why looking at historical accounts of profound religious experiences is so relevant. They often describe exactly these kinds of EF alterations.
Like Schleiermacher, you mentioned him.
Right. Friedrich Schleiermacher, a key figure in German theology, described these mysterious moments. He talked about a feeling or intuition where some ordinary event, maybe watching a sunset or being in a church service, suddenly expands. It develops quickly into an image of the universe.
An image of the universe that's not experiencing a specific divine being, is it? It sounds like the whole world's character changes.
Exactly. It's an experience where the world as a whole feels suddenly interconnected, meaningful, imbued with a sense of the infinite. It's an altered, intensified relationship with reality itself. That's a classic EF shift.
And Rudolf Otto, too.
Yes, Otto's famous work on the numinous describes an awareness of the presence of that which is a mystery inexpressible. And this awareness doesn't just stay abstract, it brings with it a powerful sense of the world as a whole becoming something beautiful and pure and glorious. Again, the quality of reality itself changes.
So in both cases, it seems the fundamental shift is in the background feeling, the EF. And that altered feeling then maybe seeks out or finds resonance with concepts from a religious tradition.
That's the idea. The structure of reality is experienced differently, perhaps as sacred, profoundly connected, or imbued with mystery. Detachment gives way to participation, or indifference gives way to awe.
Okay, let's really tie this together now by looking at that case study you highlighted, Leo Tolstoy's conversion, described in his book, A Confession. This seems to perfectly illustrate the interplay between illness, faith, and these shifts in EF.
It's an incredibly powerful and well-documented example of a radical, almost dateable alteration in existential feeling. We can sort of see stages.
Stage 1. Before the crisis, how was his EF then?
apparently very robust and positive. He describes his life as full of meaning, his projects felt valuable, he was successful, secure, and crucially, during this time, he dismissed religious faith. He called it unnecessary, unreasonable gibberish.
Why unnecessary?
Because his world already felt meaningful and secure. He had no felt need for salvation or external meaning, because his own background sense of reality, his EF, was stable and provided that sense of belonging and purpose.
Okay, makes sense. Then came stage 2, the crisis.
And his description reads almost exactly like a textbook case of major depression, or what we might call profound existential despair, a sudden catastrophic collapse of meaning.
Not just sadness, but the loss of the possibility of meaning.
Yes. He famously asked why. Why live? Why do anything if it all ends in annihilation? The invitation to live, as that earlier quote put it, was completely withdrawn. His world became alien, hostile, meaningless, a classic EF collapse.
A nightmare world, like the other description.
Precisely. But then came stage 3, the turn towards faith and a partial restoration.
And what was key here? He found solace in the face of the common people, right?
Yes, but the truly fascinating part, phenomenologically, is why the faith suddenly made sense. He gained what the sources call a new sensibility, and those very same articles of faith, the ones he previously dismissed as unnecessary gibberish,
Suddenly provided meaning.
they provided meaning because they directly addressed the profound need created by his altered existential state, the despair, the sense of meaninglessness that was his new, agonizing reality. The faith offered concepts and a framework that cohered with that felt reality and offered a path through it.
The doctrine finally fit the feeling. The need came first, created by the EF shift, and the faith provided the answer that resonated with that need.
Exactly. And this makes Tolstoy's case so incredibly instructive for this whole deep dive, because that experience of crisis, the structural collapse of meaning, how do we classify it?
Right. Is it neuropsychiatric, a major depressive episode, or is it religious, a dark night of the soul leading to spiritual conversion?
It could arguably be interpreted either way, couldn't it? It shows just how entangled these domains of human experience can be when our fundamental sense of reality, our EF, undergoes such a radical shift.
And it really supports the idea that religious traditions might have partly emerged as ways to conceptualize and cope with these profound shifts in our existential footing, these moments when the world stops making sense in the usual way.
It suggests that if the core of religiosity isn't primarily about intellectual beliefs or specific brain states, but about this tacit, felt sense of being in the world, then understanding it really requires the tools of phenomenology. We need to understand the feeling, the need that the faith addresses.
We absolutely need those phenomenological resources to grasp the need that the belief system is designed to meet.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. What a journey this has been, really mapping this out. So, to recap for everyone listening,
Mm-hmm.
we've seen how the experience of profound illness, like the estrangement and major depression, and the experience of profound faith, like the new sensibility after conversion, can both be understood through changes in this typically stable, usually invisible, background sense of being in the world.
These existential feelings, and the fact that an experience like Tolstoy's can be plausibly interpreted through either a clinical or a spiritual lens, just reinforces that methodological point we discussed earlier.
Right, because phenomenology explores the very conditions of possibility for any experience.
It has to hold investigative and interpretive priority over neuroscience, which focuses on the mechanisms within that already structured experience. You need to understand the structure of the experience first to know what the brain activity you're measuring actually relates to.
Describe the what before you fully explain the how. So this entire deep dive, exploring the architecture of experience through illness and faith, it leaves us with a pretty significant, maybe even unsettling final thought for you, the listener, to perhaps reflect on.
Yeah, if it's true that our most fundamental convictions, whether they're religious beliefs or deeply held secular humanist values or even political ideologies, if these gain their initial foothold, their initial justification, not primarily through careful, rational deliberation,
but because they just seem to fit, because they cohere with a pre-reflective, often hard-to-articulate existential feeling about the nature of reality.
then how do we really draw the line? How do we truly discern the difference between a well-reasoned philosophical argument and perhaps just a very elaborate description of a feeling?
What are the actual bedrock foundations of your own sense of reality? And what happens, or what would it mean, if those foundations started to feel shaky?
That really is the ultimate question, isn't it? The question of the very architecture of our experience.
A profound thought indeed. We'll leave you with that to ponder. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.